The words hit me like a Michigan winter storm. Don't come back here ever again. My own daughter's voice, sharp as broken glass, echoed through her doorway. I stood there on her porch, clutching a small wrapped gift, watching the door slam shut between us. At 58 years old, I thought I'd survived every kind of heartbreak. But nothing prepared me for the moment my own child would ban me from her life forever. The morning had started with such hope. I'd wrapped the little ceramic angel I found at the thrift store, the one with golden wings that reminded me of the Christmas ornaments we used to make together when she was small. My daughter Sarah had always loved angels, even as a grown woman, with children of her own. I thought maybe this time would be different. Maybe this visit wouldn't end in another argument. The drive to her house in suburban Detroit had been filled with nervous energy. I practiced what I'd say, how I'd smile, how I'd keep my voice light and cheerful. Don't mention the unpaid phone calls. Don't ask about the grandkids' school events you weren't invited to. Just be grateful for whatever scraps of love she's willing to give. But when Sarah opened the door, her expression told me everything I needed to know. No warmth in her eyes, no smile. Just that familiar look of irritation, like I was a door-to-door salesman interrupting her perfect Saturday morning. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Not "Hi, Mom," or "What a nice surprise." Just that flat, unwelcoming question that made my stomach drop. I held up the small gift, my hands trembling slightly. "I found something I thought you might like." "Just wanted to. I told you to call first. I tried calling. You didn't answer." Maybe there's a reason for that. The words stung, but I forced myself to keep smiling. Behind her, I could hear my granddaughter Emma laughing at cartoons on the television. The sound of that precious giggle made my heart ache with longing. Can I see Emma for a few minutes? I brought her a little something too. Sarah's jaw tightened. "Mom, we've talked about this. You can't just show up whenever you want. I have a life. We have boundaries. Boundaries." That word had become her weapon of choice, a wall she built higher every time I tried to get close. When did loving your child become crossing a boundary? "I'm sorry," I whispered, trying to hand her the gift. "I just missed you both so much, and I thought..." "You thought what?" "That you could guilt-trip me with presents? That showing up unannounced would somehow fix everything?" "Fix what? Sarah, what is there to fix? I'm your mother. I love you." Something dark flashed in her eyes. Maybe it was stress from her job, or problems with her husband, or just years of resentment I'd never understood. But when she spoke again, her voice was cold as the February wind whipping through the bare trees behind me. "That's exactly the problem. Mom, you think love gives you the right to invade our lives whenever you want. Well, it doesn't." I stood there, feeling smaller with each word. Neighbors were probably watching from their windows, witnessing my humiliation. My daughter's voice rose, carrying across the manicured lawn like a public announcement of my failures. "I'm tired of this. Mom, I'm tired of your surprise visits, your guilt trips, your constant need for attention. I can't do this anymore. Sarah, please, no. I'm done. Don't come back here ever again." The door slammed with such force that the little ceramic angel slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the concrete steps. Pieces of golden wings scattered like my broken heart, and I stood there staring at the fragments of my love, trying to understand how we'd gotten here. The walk back to my car felt like a funeral procession. Each step away from her house was a step away from everything I'd ever wanted to be: a welcome grandmother, a cherished mother, a necessary part of my daughter's life. Instead, I was just another disappointment she needed to shut out. As I drove through the familiar streets of our old neighborhood, memories flooded back like water through a broken dam. How different things had been when Sarah was small. I could still see her at 3 years old, her tiny hand gripping mine as we walked to the corner store. She'd chatter about everything and nothing, the color of the flowers, the sound of dogs barking, the taste of the peppermint candy I'd buy her if she was good. Back then, I was her whole world, and she was mine. There were the midnight fevers when she was 6, burning up with flu while I sat beside her bed with cool washcloths and whispered lullabies. She'd reach for me in her sleep, her small fingers finding mine in the darkness, trusting me to make everything better. I remembered teaching her to braid her hair for school, standing behind her at the bathroom mirror, our eyes meeting in the reflection. "You're the best mommy ever," she'd said once, and I treasured those words like precious gems. When did that little girl disappear? When did my love become suffocating instead of comforting? The winter wind cut through my coat as I finally made it home to my empty apartment. Michigan winters are brutal, but nothing compared to the ice that had formed between my daughter and me. I set my purse on the kitchen counter, still clutching the small gift bag that held Emma's present, a little book about a grandmother who loved her granddaughter to the moon and back. Asterisk ironic, I thought bitterly. Maybe I should have gotten her a book about grandmothers who knew when to stay away. I made coffee with shaking hands, trying to warm the chill that had settled deep in my bones. The kitchen felt impossibly quiet. For 28 years, this room had been filled with Sarah's voice. First her baby babbles, then her childhood chatter, later her teenage complaints about homework and boys, and all the injustices of growing up. The chair across from me at the small table seemed to hold the ghost of her presence. How many conversations had we shared in those chairs? How many meals? How many late-night talks when she couldn't sleep? How many celebrations and arguments and ordinary moments that had once felt like the most important thing in the world? I found myself whispering prayers into the silence. Not for my own broken heart, but for Sarah's happiness. Let her find peace, I prayed. Let her marriage be strong. Let Emma grow up healthy and loved. Let all their dreams come true, even if those dreams don't include me. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a letter, "My dearest Sarah." I began, my handwriting shaky through the tears. If I have ever embarrassed you, if my love has ever felt like a burden instead of a blessing, please forgive me. I never learned how to be a mother without loving too much. The words poured out like confession. I told her about the nights I'd lain awake when she was young, planning ways to make her life better, dreaming of the woman she'd become. I wrote about the pride I felt watching her graduate college, get married, become a mother herself. I tried to explain how hard it was to step back when every instinct screamed at me to stay close, to help, to be needed. A mother's love never ends, I finished. It doesn't know how to give up or let go or respect boundaries that feel like walls. I'm sorry if my love has hurt you. I'm sorry if I failed you. But I will never stop loving you, even from a distance. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside my old Bible between the pages of Psalms, where I kept the most precious things. Some words, I realized, were meant to be written, but never sent. There were prayers whispered into the darkness, love offered without expectation of return, days passed in a haze of loneliness. I went to work at the grocery store, came home to my empty apartment, ate dinner alone, while watching game shows that couldn't quite drown out the silence. Friends called, but how do you explain that your own daughter has banned you from her life? How do you admit that your love, the most natural thing in the world, has somehow become unwelcome? And if you're still listening to this story, it means something in it has touched your heart. Maybe you recognize the mother who loves too much, or maybe you see yourself in the daughter who needs space to breathe. Either way, please stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. It was a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after that terrible door slam, when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, hadn't been expecting anyone for weeks. When I opened the door, my heart nearly stopped. Emma stood there on my doorstep, her small frame bundled in a pink winter coat, her cheeks red from the cold. In her mittened hands, she held the little gift bag I dropped on her mother's porch, the one with the book about grandmothers and granddaughters. "Grandma?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Mommy's in the car. She said I could give this back to you." I looked past her to see Sarah's car idling in my driveway, exhaust puffing white in the cold air. My daughter sat behind the wheel, staring straight ahead, her face unreadable through the windshield. "Come inside, sweetheart," I whispered, kneeling down to Emma's level. "You must be freezing." But Emma didn't move. Instead, she looked up at me with those serious brown eyes that reminded me so much of Sarah at that age. "Grandma," she said softly, her breath making little clouds in the cold air. "Mommy cries when you're not here." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Mommy cries when you're not here." This beautiful, innocent child had seen what I couldn't, that behind all Sarah's anger and boundaries and harsh words was a daughter who missed her mother just as much as I missed her. "She does?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma nodded solemnly. "She looks at pictures of you when she thinks I'm not watching. And sometimes she picks up the phone like she's gonna call you, but then she puts it down." I glanced toward the car again, seeing Sarah in a different light. Not the cold, angry woman who'd slammed the door in my face, but a daughter caught between love and pride, between wanting closeness and needing space. "Can you tell Mommy something for me?" I asked Emma, taking the gift bag with hands that trembled. "What?" "Tell her. Tell her I love her, no matter what." Emma smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen in weeks. "I will, Grandma." "And Grandma, I love you too." She turned and ran back to the car, her little boots crunching in the snow. I watched through my window as Sarah leaned over to listen to whatever Emma was whispering. For just a moment, I thought I saw my daughter's shoulders shake, as if she was crying. Then they drove away, leaving me standing in my doorway with renewed hope and a heart that felt lighter than it had in months. Meanwhile, across town, Sarah was fighting her own battle. After dropping Emma at a friend's house for a sleepover, she found herself alone with thoughts she'd been pushing down for weeks. "Don't come back here ever again." The words she'd screamed at me echoed in her mind, and for the first time, she really heard how cruel they sounded. How final. How much they must have hurt. She thought about her childhood, not the moments of frustration or embarrassment she'd focused on lately, but the deeper memories. The way I'd worked 2 jobs to afford her dance lessons. The Halloween costumes I'd sewn by hand because store-bought ones were too expensive. The way I'd believed in her dreams even when she'd stopped believing in them herself. She remembered the night before her wedding, when I'd sat on her bed, brushing her hair like I used to when she was little. "You're going to be the most beautiful bride," I'd whispered. And Sarah had seen tears in my eyes, tears of joy and pride, and the bittersweet ache of letting go. When had my love started feeling suffocating instead of supportive? When had my presence become an invasion instead of a comfort? The truth was, Sarah had been struggling. Her marriage was going through a rough patch. Work was stressful, and she felt like she was barely keeping her head above water. When I showed up with my cheerful voice, and my little gifts, and my eager questions about her life, it felt like pressure she couldn't handle. It was easier to push me away than to admit she needed help. But now, sitting in her quiet house, she realized what she'd really pushed away. Not just a mother who loved too much, but the one person who'd loved her before anyone else even knew she existed. The woman who'd sacrificed everything to give her a good life, who still worried about her happiness, who still saw her as precious and worthy of love even when Sarah couldn't see it herself. Tell me in the comments, have you ever said words you couldn't take back? Have you ever let pride build walls between you and someone who loved you? 5 days later, I heard a soft knock at my door. Not the sharp rap of a stranger, or the confident knock of a friend, but something hesitant, almost afraid. When I opened it, Sarah stood there with tears streaming down her face, looking more like the little girl I remembered than the angry woman who'd banished me from her life. "Mom," she whispered, her voice broken. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean any of it. I didn't hesitate." I pulled her into my arms, feeling her sob against my shoulder like she had when she was small and the world felt too big and scary to face alone. She was my daughter, my beautiful, complicated, hurting daughter, and no amount of harsh words could ever change that. "I never stopped loving you," I whispered into her hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. Not for a single second. We stood there in my doorway, two women who'd forgotten how to bridge the gap between love and space, between caring and controlling. But love, I realized, is patient. It waits through the angry words, and the slammed doors, and the weeks of silence. It waits because it knows that sometimes people need to lose something precious before they remember how much it meant to them. Sarah pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Can I come in? I have so much to tell you. You never have to ask permission to come home," I said, stepping aside to let her. In Dot, we sat at my kitchen table, the same table where she'd done homework and eaten countless meals and shared dreams and fears and ordinary moments that had somehow become extraordinary in memory. I made coffee, and she told me everything about the problems with her husband, the stress at work, the way she'd been taking out her frustrations on everyone around her. Especially me. I was so tired of feeling like I was disappointing everyone, she said, her hands wrapped around the warm mug. "And you always seemed so hopeful, like you expected me to be this perfect daughter who had everything figured out. It was easier to push you away than to admit I was struggling." "Oh, sweetheart," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I never expected you to be perfect. I just wanted to be part of your life. I know that now." Emma made me realize. She said you looked sad when I wouldn't let you visit. She asked me why I was mean to the grandma who loves her so much. Children, I thought, see truth that adults complicate with pride and fear and stubborn independence. I missed you so much, Mom, even when I was angry, even when I was building those stupid boundaries. I missed you every single day. We talked until the sun set and the kitchen grew dim. We shared stories and apologies and the kind of honest conversation we should have had months ago. Sarah told me about her marriage counseling, about the steps she was taking to manage her stress better. I told her about the loneliness, about the letter I'd written but never sent, about the prayers I whispered for her happiness every night. "Can you forgive me?" she asked as she prepared to leave. "There's nothing to forgive," I said, meaning it. "We're family. We figure things out." Before she left, she hugged me tight, really tight, like she was trying to make up for all the hugs we'd missed. "Mom, would you like to come to dinner Sunday? Emma's been asking for your famous lasagna. Your famous lasagna." Such simple words, but they meant everything. They meant I was welcome again. They meant my love had a place in her life. They meant we'd found our way back to each other. That Sunday dinner was like stepping back into a life I'd thought was lost forever. Emma chattered about school and friends and a loose tooth that was almost ready to come out. Sarah's husband apologized for the distance, admitting he'd been dealing with his own stress and hadn't been supportive enough. And Sarah, my beautiful, strong daughter, looked at me with something I hadn't seen in her eyes for far too long. Gratitude. You know what I realized? She said as we cleared the dishes together. A mother's love is the one place I'll never really be unwelcome. Even when I try to lock it out, it just waits patiently on the other side of the door. She was right. Love doesn't give up, even when it's rejected. It doesn't stop believing in second chances, even when the door gets slammed. It just waits, patient as sunrise, knowing that eventually the walls we build out of pride and fear will crumble, and love will still be there, unchanged and unchanging. As I drove home that evening, I thought about all the families struggling with this same battle, the balance between love and boundaries, between caring and controlling, between holding on and letting go. Maybe Sarah and I had to go through that painful separation to learn how to love each other better. Maybe some doors have to be slammed before we appreciate the ones that remain open. The ceramic angel I'd brought that terrible day was still broken, scattered on Sarah's porch in pieces too small to repair. But the love it represented, that was stronger than any boundaries, deeper than any misunderstandings, more patient than any pride. Don't let pride silence love before it's too late. Don't let fear build walls so high that forgiveness can't climb over them. And if someone you love is struggling to balance their independence with their need for connection, be patient. Love them enough to give them space, but love them enough to be there when they're ready to come home. If this story has touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere out there, there's a mother waiting for her child to come home, or a child who's forgotten that love doesn't have to be perfect to be precious. And maybe, just maybe, this story will remind them that it's never too late to open the door again. The words that once shattered my world, "Don't come back here ever again," had been replaced with something infinitely more beautiful. Welcome home, Mom. And in the end, that's all any of us really want, to belong somewhere. To be welcomed home by the people we love most, flaws and all.